And for the next 3 weeks, we will be looking at 3 prophets who have a very important lesson that I think is all kind of united in its own way. And we have this natural response that we have to our enemies, right? It's pretty much good riddance. Like, we'll deal with them to a certain extent, but goodness sakes, when enough is enough, it's enough. I think that the Allied forces kind of figured this one out in World War I. Okay, all right, it was fun at first, but now it's not so fun anymore. And we kind of have a similar thing that we do in our lives. We deal with someone, and we're okay with putting up with their crap for a couple of days. But man, oh man, when you have to, when it keeps impacting your life, and you wake up thinking about it, you go to sleep thinking about it, you have dreams about it. It's just like, okay, all right, move on. And so what happens? What happens when those enemies that we have are our family, when they're old friends, when they're people that are in the church? So over the next 3 weeks, we're going to look at 3 prophets that talk about how we treat enemies. This is another series that is very much so personal to me. The prophet we'll be looking at tonight is the prophet Amos. Just a little something about Amos. Amos prophesied around the early 700s BC. So remember, BC, everything goes backwards. So early 700s, that would actually be somewhere around 770 BC, not 730. Everything's reversed once you get BC. And then at that time, God's people, Israel, were actually divided into 2 different kingdoms. There was Israel, that was the northern kingdom. Then there was Judah, that was the southern kingdom. And the 2 nations had a very rocky history. The northern kingdom actually ended up erecting idols in their capital to make sure that people didn't go to the southern kingdom to have their religious, festivals, which probably wasn't the smartest move. And that just kind of tells you the undertone of how the northern kingdom would work. In fact, according to the Bible, none of the kings of the north did God actually like. He not like that. I mean, he was pleased with them. He thought that they were all evil. Okay, so I kind of feel like, when you're going in to get a job and you have a good reference on your job application, I feel like, having a bad reference from God is probably not a great way to get that job. So it's a very rough start here. So what's going on? Well, it says here, the words of Amos, one of the shepherds of Tekoa. Don't worry about where Tekoa is. It really isn't relevant for today. The vision he saw concerning Israel 2 years before the earthquake. That's kind of how they taught time back then. When Uzziah was king of Judah. Now, so okay, we've got Uzziah. That's the king in Judah. He's also known, if you read the book of Kings, he's known as the King Azariah. It's the same guy. He goes by 2 different names depending on where he's mentioned. His father was Amaziah, which probably doesn't mean anything to you. Unless you're a nerd like myself, in which case you will know that his father was actually captured by the king of Israel in the north, and who was the predecessor to Jeroboam. It says here, Jeroboam, the son of Jehoash. Jehoash was the guy that arrested Amaziah, and so that just kind of tells you what things were like there. Not great, very much so at each other's throats. And this Jeroboam here, this is Jeroboam the second, not the first. Once again, you probably don't care, but if you do care, there's that bit of information for you. Amos prophesied punishment on Israel's sometimes enemies, sometimes allies. So here's Israel, they're a wicked nation. Okay, all right. But then they have these people all around them, these other nations. And sometimes these guys are their friends, and they're not friends. Friends with... I don't know exactly how you'd say that. They weren't really friends, but they weren't really necessarily all the time enemies. So I guess on again, off again friends? I don't know. Is someone you'd probably have sign your cast, but not necessarily invite to a sleepover. I don't know if that kind of gives you something to base it off of. But anyways, and so he goes through all through chapter 1 and into chapter 2. He goes on this series of judgments on all of Israel's enemies. Now, how cool is this? Okay, you got these people you just hate, and you're just like, haha, now God hates them too, and he's saying about how much he hates them. It's like, yes, finally, something good is happening here. So let's look at these things. We're not going to read all of it, but because there's a lot of it. But I'll just kind of set the stage here. For 3 sins of Damascus, even for 4, I will not relent, because she threshed Gilead with sledges having iron teeth. I will send fire on the house of Hazael that will consume that fortress. Hazael was one of their leaders. When they say the house of so-and-so, that is how they wrote in the ancient times to talk about their dynasty. So the house of Hazael would be Hazael and his descendants who ruled the throne. Not necessarily descendants by blood, though. Once again, if you don't care, then it's just a waste of time. Of Ben-Hadad, I will break down the gates of Damascus. I will destroy the king who is in the valley of Avon and the one who holds a scepter in Beth-Aden. The people of Aram will go into exile to Kir, says the Lord. Now, you might be sitting there and you say, well, that's great, Michael, but what if I don't care about any of that? Okay, well, let me just summarize for you then. In chapter 1, verses 3 through 5, he talks about, you heard Damascus. That would be Syria. This is an enemy to the north. In verses 6 through 8, he talks about the Philistines, which are the enemy to the southwest. And in verses 9 through 10, he talks about Tyre. That's to the north. That's real close to Sidon. In verses 11 through 12, he talks about their enemy Edom. In verses 13 through chapter 2, verse 3, he talks about their enemies, Ammon and Moab, also to the east. So are you getting kind of the flow of this? They have a lot of enemies. Do you ever feel maybe a little bit like Israel in this situation where it just sounds like, wow, I'm surrounded by enemies, people that don't really like me. And boy, oh boy, God's judging them all. And so then in chapter 2, verses 4 through 5, God says that he's also going to punish Judah. Ha-ha, one up on you, Judah. Because you remember Judah was the one that was supposed to be righteous. And here God is saying that he's going to punish them too. And so Israel gets the last laugh. And they're happy about it. They're hoo-ha, woo-wee. Man, oh man, great. Enemies are punished. Thanks God. Punishing for people that I hate. I just love it when God does that. I was watching this movie. It was called The Great Outdoors. And there's this part where his, I guess it would be brother-in-law, I guess. He's talking about how, what do you see out there? And he's like, well, I just see a forest. And he's like, well, I see the underdeveloped resources. And he goes on this long tangent. And he's all, but it's probably for the best, because you'll probably outlive us all. We'll just die of heart attacks. And he says, wouldn't that be great if a bunch of people you just hate just drop dead? And, I think that that's kind of what Israel is feeling at this point. They're like, this is great. And it's funny because I was teaching a lesson once about hating our enemies, and how to deal with that and how to forgive people and how to love people and that kind of stuff. And there was someone all throughout my lesson that I was giving who just kept repeating about how very vocally they disagreeing. Oh, I don't hate anybody. There's nobody I hate. And I was sitting there teaching. This was years ago. When I was sitting there teaching the lesson, I was thinking, this person's going to be a problem. And you know what? They literally went from person to person, irritating people. And it was never their fault. And, oh, it's not my fault. They just need to forgive me. And it's like, oh, have you ever known anybody like that? And I knew it because of this. We all have problems not exactly loving certain people, maybe even hating them. And it's a natural part of our lives as people. Running from it isn't going to change it. It's something that we have to deal with and face. And when we get to that point of saying, no, there's nobody who I hate, that's just a lie. You liar. You are a liar. If you ever watch Catching Fire, Hunger Games Part 2, you are a liar. If not, it's just a useless reference, and you guys are thinking, wow, this guy watches too much TV. It's the nerd part again, I guess, man. So we're going through all this stuff about how Israel's neighbors are going to be punished, all these people who have mistreated them. But then we get to chapter 2, verse 6, and things take a drastic turn. This is what the Lord says, for 3 sins of Israel. Oh, we missed it by that much. I thought we'd be able to get out of here before he started preaching, and me too. I mean, come on, go back to Tekoa, wherever the heck that is. For 3 sins of Israel, even for 4, I will not relent. They sell the innocent for silver and the needy for a pair of sandals. Taking advantage of people. So it was okay. It was okay back when God was saying that he was going to punish all the people that Israel didn't like. But now, this isn't good. Israel too would be judged. Why? Why would they be punished? What have they done that would warrant God looking down on them in judgment? Well, how they treated others was the very first thing that God mentioned. They were treating others poorly, taking advantage of the weak. taking advantage of the poor. God wasn't too big of a fan of that. And so here we have these people who have these enemies, and they're just so excited that they were going to get justified, and now, oh, it's happening to us too. And here's the thing. How we treat others is actually the sign of whether we are living in sin or not as Christians. Big idea. The mark of living in sin is how we treat others. So we think there's a lot of different things that make us really spiritual, right? Better than other people. If we are using the gifts of the Spirit, man, I'm a step above you, you peon. We got let's see what else. I know a lot of things about the Bible. I've been studying the Bible for years, and I can just, we can never have somebody, in the church who doesn't know everything about the Bible, because surely the mark of spirituality is that you know everything about pointless details that have nothing to do with you changing your heart. That's kind of been the mark of Christian maturity. I can gossip, I can backbite, I can treat people like crap, so long as I know a lot of facts about the Bible. Because when we all get to heaven, or when I get to heaven, because none of you are going to make it, when I get to heaven, God's going to say, man, you knew everything about the Bible. You're even teaching me some things. I didn't even know that about the Bible. And, just kind of this general attitude of arrogance, like, man, I'm so much better than you. And it's the sign that we're living in sin by how we are treating other people. We think we're so spiritual. And the Bible says over and over again, if you think that you're spiritual, restore people. It's really easy to nitpick people and to pick them apart and criticize them and backbite and betray them. That's super easy to do. You don't need my help to do that. But how we treat other people it shows us where we are really at. When we don't work well with others, when we have snide comments about everything, when we have loud and vocal in support or in worship, everybody who has called me, who insists on calling me Pastor so-and-so, every single one of them have then gone behind my back and started gossip and stuff behind me. And I always tell people, I say, I don't need an ego boost. My name is Michael. Just Michael. That's it. If that's too long, you can narrow it to Mike. If that's too long, you say, I'm fine with it. Just, I don't need the whole pastor so-and-so, which some people like that, whatever. It's not for me. People who are loud and vocal in support and in worship, they love singing songs and, oh God, look at how much I love singing songs. But they're just as loud in their complaints. And it was really funny because there was a situation, wait, this you laugh with me on this, okay? There was a situation where the pastor was giving this sermon, and he was talking about people who cause problems. And, they were all vocal and whatnot in worship and everything. But then he was talking about how people need to learn in the church, need to learn how to close their mouths. And nobody said anything. And I was just thinking, I know some of you this week, I heard some of you talking behind my back. Where's that vocalization now? And I just thought it was funny. It's when people are in frequent conflicts with each other. Having run-ins with people is inevitable, right? You're going to have disagreements with your wife, your kids, your coworkers. That's inevitable. But being in conflict with people is something God's not a big fan of that. When you're surrounded by disgruntled gossips who need an ear, and it just so happens that you are the willing party. When you can't be told anything, but you always want to say something. When you make lists of what the pastor is doing wrong that may hypothetically be 5 pages long and how you need to make all these changes for him, that might not be the best thing around. Just might not be the best idea to have. About everything about how the pastor's doing it wrong and all this stuff. Here's the thing, and I've never been a senior pastor, so take this with a grain of salt. But one thing that I have learned is that it's a lot easier to pastor when you've never done it before. For those of you who don't get what I'm saying, it's a lot easier to parent when you don't have any kids. I have all these ideas of how all these people are doing it wrong. The reason why their kids messed up is because of them. My kids will never do that. If they just done this, their kids would have turned out to be, I don't know, NFL players or something. I don't know, whatever. And the thing is, it's like, well, that sounds real good, except for when you have kids and you're like, I made it through another day without killing them. Yes. Yes. It's a little bit different when you're actually there, wearing the shoes, walking the walk. It's a lot harder. When everything is someone else's fault. Oh, I had nothing to do with that. When you love learning, but you hate changing. I was very, very surprised by when I became a pastor with how many people cause problems that love learning. I assumed that the people who were going to be causing problems were the druggies, the alcoholics, the people who weren't there as faithfully as I was, who weren't as good as me, No, they're people who have been in the church for 30, 40 years and should know better. And they're causing problems. In fact, I will go a step further. I have yet to deal with a major problem as a leader in any capacity caused by someone who is new to the church. I have only had problems. 100% of the problems that I've had to deal with have been from people who've been in the church for forever. People over the age of 50. It's amazing. That really caught me off guard, back when I was young and I thought I would change the whole world and I was the best person for the job, before I had any experience. And when you love learning but you hate changing, when you have unresolved problems, often with your authority figures. I'm not just talking about pastors here. I'm talking about you fathers and mothers too. One of the key things about the Bible is the way that God repeatedly brings up the thing that he wants to give us peace in our relationship with our parents. Yes, I know the Bible says to respect and honor your parents. I know that. But I'm talking about as an adult, forgiving your parents for their whatever they did wrong and moving on. The Bible actually talks about that a lot. And I was under the assumption, well, if you're a kid who respects and honors your parents, you won't have any problem when you get older. Well, that's wrong. You become your own person and things change. So you have these unresolved problems often with authority figures, not always, but often. And you change out friends and pastors who disagree with you. The mark of living in sin, how we treat others. Those are just some examples. I could give you more, but I think that's sufficient. Maybe even more than sufficient. I have spent years in the church. I grew up in the thing. And people who call themselves Christians but are hateful have caused the most hurt and chased the most people off. It's astounding to me. It wasn't all those sinners. When I was a kid, man, oh man, the pastors were always talking about homosexuals and stuff, and I thought it was going to be a bigger issue. It's like, for instance, they always teach you when you catch on fire, stop, drop, and roll. How many of you have caught on fire? No? I didn't think so. Oh, you have? Oh, well, forgive me, shut my mouth. But growing up in the church, I was always, you got to watch out for those gays. They'll ruin the church. They'll, all this stuff. And it's like, well, it actually never came up because I was too busy having to deal with old, crusty, bitter Christians. And it was a very, very big smack in the church. See, what's happened is the church in the past has failed to love the world, has failed to reach the world, and instead turned the church into a club of sorts, if you will, where you are only welcome if you do the right things, dress the right way, all that kind of stuff. Well, now here we are today, and we're saying, why aren't things happening? What's going on here? And pretending like we have no part to play in all this. Well, if I was reading in the book of Daniel, and you have Daniel, who this really righteous guy, God even tells him, hey, very happy with you. And one of the things that Daniel prays is he says, forgive us for sinning against you. He's praying about something that happened 70 years ago, just to clarify, that he was not there for. Well, he was born, but he didn't contribute to the problem, and yet he still was interceding on behalf of his people. But what we do today, I had nothing to do with that. And, it's just amazing. We as a church, we have to do better. I'm not talking about do better as far as, go through all the right motions and do the rituals correctly. I mean love. That has to be what we're about. Anything else is just a waste of time. If the church is just a place where we get together and share facts about the Bible, it's pointless. We have to grow. We have to mature. We have to endure trials. The Bible talks a lot about persecution coming from the world, but in my whole life, the American church hasn't had to endure any tribulation except from its own members. That is a very sad thing. I remember I have spent a lot of time in Mexico, and one of the things that I always did when I was in Mexico, if I could move anywhere outside of the U.S., it'd probably be to Mexico. But one of the things was we were working on this church out in the boonies, and there was a witch doctor that was in the town, and he really was not happy that we were, inviting people to the church and that kind of stuff. So he does this like chicken ritual blood thing or whatever, and we're just like, "Hey, that's gross." And we just kind of threw it away and moved on. But I mean, that's my point. Like, we had witch doctors going after us in Mexico. Here I have, old Miss Betty who makes a mean pumpkin pie. Can't keep her mouth shut for 5 seconds. That's a problem. We as Christians have to find the power of being silent. So Israel and Judah fought each other, and they also fought amongst themselves, like the people of Israel were fighting the people of Israel, you get what I'm saying, amongst themselves, and also against each other, the other nations too. So they were all everybody was fighting. It would be the equivalent of you going home tonight and getting in a fight with your family, and then tomorrow you go to work and get in a fight with your coworkers, and then next week you come to church and get in a fight with other people at church. That kind of be the equivalent of what Israel is doing here. They're just not getting along with anybody. Have you ever met those girls that just don't like girls? They're like, they just don't really like other women. They're just like, it's like, okay, all right. That's kind of what Israel is here. I mean, they're one of those nations that just don't really like nations. They don't really like people. Maybe they should have just moved up to Ruidoso. Hey-oh, just kidding. It's a joke. It's a joke. It's a joke. I kid. Anyways, so surely the reason why Israel was like this and why they were mistreating, they just weren't religious or spiritual enough. Surely, right? That has to be what it is. And you say, well, that's what I was going to say, but don't call me Shirley. Well, so then we get to Amos 4:4-5. Go to Bethel and sin. Now, Bethel is a holy city to the Israelites. Go to Gilgal and sin yet more. Bring your sacrifices every morning, your tithes every 3 years. Burn leavened bread as a thank offering, and brag about your freewill offerings. Boast about them, you Israelites, for this is what you love to do, declares the sovereign Lord. So yes, actually, they did worship. And that was another thing that surprises me. Somebody's vehemence in worship doesn't mean that their heart is right. And I'll go even a step further. The people who are the loudest in support are the people who you can't count on. It's a very, very weird thing. You would think that they'd keep quiet out of like some kind of shame, but it's not true. So the answer wasn't that they weren't spiritual or religious enough. See, spiritual people, they don't go through the rituals. They love people. They serve people. Well, I love people. I just can't stand being around them. I spend all my money and time on me for myself all the time. But I love people. Well, I can't tell by your actions. Well, surely I would know if God was going to punish me, though. I mean, the Israelites, they were just stupid people. Surely they would know. Well, so besides the law that was given to them so that they would know, they rejected that. So God did some other things too. He sent prophets. They didn't listen to them either. I'm sorry, spoiler alert. I always forget that I'm supposed to tell you guys that. Spoiler alert, so now you know. But then also God did this too. Yet I destroyed the Amorites, that's their enemies, before them, though they were tall as the cedars and strong as the oaks. I destroyed their fruit above and their roots below. I fought your battles for you. And then he goes on to chapter 4. Chapter 4. I gave you empty stomachs in every city and lack of bread in every town, yet you have not returned to me, declares the Lord. I also withheld rain from you when the harvest was still 3 months away. So here's what God's saying. I blessed you and I cursed you. You still didn't listen. I gave you the law. You didn't listen to that. I gave you prophets. You didn't listen to that. So, I would know if God was going to punish me. God's blessings, Israel overlooked as the fruit of their own labor and their own accomplishments. When God did something good for Israel, they said, I did that. Have you ever done that in your life? Have you ever refused to read the Bible and just figured, I'll know if something's right or wrong? So you're on the same page with Israel. Well, I mean, surely though, if God was going to bring curses, I would know. His curses were seen as nothing more than trials and persecution. Everybody hates me. Everybody's turned their backs on me. I'm going through problem after problem. Things aren't working out with me at work and all this different stuff. It was nothing but trials and persecution. Oh, that's not God. It's just I'm going through a rough patch. Just people just don't get me. People are they're just terrible. Or maybe God's trying to get your attention. See, God did all these different things to try and touch Israel. They weren't listening. So, I would know if God was going to punish me. I'm spiritual enough that I would know. Would you? Looking back on years of hurt by these very kinds of people that I've dealt with, it's very easy to say good riddance. It's easy to despise people who call themselves Christians and then go around and say rude things to your kids or stab you in the back or gossip. It's easy to hate these kinds of people. I actually talked to a lot of my generation who's left the church and will not come, not this church, I mean the church, and will not come back because this has been their experience. Good riddance. You get what you deserve. But the thing is, and this is the part that I don't like much about God, God isn't honored by conflicts. I wish I could just point my finger at people who I didn't like. This is probably the biggest area of conflict between me and God. God says, love people, and I say, I don't like them. And he says, I know. I said, love them. And I say, but I don't like them. And he says, just, I know. I said, love them. And I said, I don't like them. You're getting the point. And there's this back and forth pool of what God wants and what I want. See, what I want is I want them to get punished. I want them to get what's coming to them. I don't want to intercede for them. I don't want to stay up at night praying for them. I don't want to do that. I like my sleep. I like being left alone. I'm of the opinion that if someone's a pain in the butt, good riddance. I don't need you in my life anyways. But God has this other way of us dealing with our enemies. He has us do these things that we don't like much. Resolving conflicts if you can. Sometimes you just can't. I understand that. Doing everything in your power, being open in the future should things change to resolving the conflict. Forgiving, not holding it over their heads, things like that. When others intentionally hurt and lie about you, when they're mean-hearted, when they give every reason to leave the church, forgive them. 1 Corinthians 6:7 says this, the very fact that you have lawsuits among you means you have been completely defeated already. Why not rather be wronged? Why not rather be cheated? And that really summarizes what Christianity is really about. See, it's easy to hate these people for what they've done to you. But now let's kind of bring up my main point that I hope means as much to you as it meant to me when I realized it when I was writing this. I am Israel. You are Israel. See, you have these enemies in your life. You're okay with God doing something bad to them. They deserved it. As long as it doesn't get on you. See, I thought I was a hero in the story because I did everything right. Basically, I made myself the perfect God in the story, and they were Satan. Well, it's really easy to demonize someone you don't like. It's not okay to mistreat those who mistreat you. You might say, I get that. Let me throw a hypothetical situation at you. That's not very hypothetical. You are a pastor. Somebody comes along, and they're just a pain in the butt to deal with, but you welcome them in, you accept them, you show them love. They start gossiping and stirring stuff up behind your back. Frustrating, okay. You forgive them, you try and work with them, you try and help them to grow, they continue. See, it's right around here that we have this idea, well, I tried to do it the right way, now the gloves. I tried to do it your way, God, I get that. I returned good for the evil that they have done to me. But now they've returned evil for my good that I gave to them that they didn't deserve in the first place. Yeah, okay, but see, now we're getting into that unfortunate area of life, giving evil for the evil that they've done. So when the Bible says, do not return evil for evil, this is what they're saying. You were right. Congratulations. Still, don't repay evil for evil. This is why this series is very personal to me. It's things that I've actually gone through, which, I wish pastors would preach more from things that that they've really gone through. Sometimes, a lot of the sermons I watch online and stuff, that you can tell that it's just like real dumbed down and stuff. I used to think that the problems I dealt with as a pastor, nobody else ever had any idea of what I'm going through, but that's just not true. Everybody out there deals with depression, frustration, the death of dreams, betrayal. These are things that are common to everybody. So obviously, I do need to give a little addendum here. Church leaders still have to bring discipline, but they shouldn't enjoy it. And another little addendum, I also want to mention this. I'm going to mention this in a couple weeks too. You don't have to hang around with people who cause problems. In fact, the Bible tells us not to hang out with Christians who are causing problems and division and disunity. So stick that in your pipe and smoke it. Israel was okay with God punishing others, just not them. So now we get to chapter 2, verse 4 through 5 of Amos. And God's thing that he said against Judah, well, they weren't obeying God's law. The first thing that he said about Israel, which is a much longer section, in fact, Amos was a prophet that went to Israel, they weren't treating others right. But the interesting thing is that both Israel and Judah were guilty. It's also interesting to see that God didn't give us a scale of who was more wrong. And this is the big idea of the big idea of the big idea. Okay, so that's not it. That's what I already said before. Returning evil for evil, mistreating those who mistreat you. Okay, all right. We talked about that, okay? That's not the big idea. There it is right there. This is the big idea of everything that I want to talk about, that I want to summarize from what we've looked at in Amos. When you desire punishment for them, be careful lest it come on you. When you desire God's punishment for them, be careful lest it come on you. It's easy to find all the things wrong with somebody else, all the things that they need to change. It's a lot harder to be aware of what's in your own heart. Most people are okay with them being punished, whoever them is. They just can't imagine deserving punishment themselves. They don't want to live in a world where they might also be guilty. We can see what others are doing wrong and apply the Bible to them, but we don't judge ourselves. It's real easy to do that too. When you're reading the Bible, man, this is for that person. Yeah, they sure need to learn from the Bible. It's like I was looking at this funny joke, and this guy's reading the story of the Pharisee who says, "Thank God I'm not like this guy." He's reading that story, and he's all sitting there. And he's like, "Haha, thank God I'm not like this Pharisee." Anyways, we can see what others are doing wrong. We can apply the Bible to them, but we don't want to judge ourselves, and we definitely don't want God to judge us. We want to just go on doing the same thing we've always done. We wrong those who wrong us and think we are more righteous because they started it. Their sin was greater. It's okay. It's like this. As a pastor, I was greatly surprised. Somebody mistreats me and I'm wrong if I have a bad attitude for it. That didn't seem very fair. I did what was wrong. You did what was right. I did what was right. You did what was wrong. And we stayed at that stalemate for a while. Well, now I have a bad attitude because I'm tired of your crap. You mean it's wrong for me to have that bad attitude? And God's like, you got it. You got it, buddy. That's a very difficult thing to do because especially as a pastor, you're just like, yeah, you're no good. Yeah, you dirty dog. And so then that takes us to a very alarming idea that I discovered only recently. You are no more deserving of God's grace than them. Whoever them is. Ouch. But God, I made a better opportunity of the grace you gave me. You've never said that? Come on. And like them, you aren't self-made. Nobody here is self-made. We all climb on the shoulders of those who came before us, whether we like it or not. Jesus said people will know us by our love for each other. So that brings up a very interesting question. What would our enemies say about how we love? I didn't say, what would your friends say about how you love? I said, what would our enemies say about how we love? What is the result of me being somewhere or talking to somebody? Do I make people feel worse or better? Do I point more to Jesus or less to Jesus? What's the result of me being somewhere? And these are things that are very difficult because we don't always like the answer. Do I make things better or worse? Do I enjoy peace or do I make peace? So I'm going to give you each a little to-do homework. That's what it's called. Man, oh man, it's been too long since I've been in school. I'm going to give you each homework. Well, has it been too long since I've been in school? Is that something that you ever go back? Like, who's woken up and said, man, I want to go back to taking high school classes? Come on. Anyways, this week, ask God to help you because you need to change just like they do. And if you don't know that, that's part of the problem. Lord, I pray you just reveal our hearts to us, Lord. We are masters of hiding from you and hiding things in our hearts. God, I pray that this week as we seek you, you'll just show us our heart, that we would stop being the master of everybody else's offenses, and we'd instead allow you to change our attitudes and our hearts. God, that your church would be stronger and better for it. And that we may one day eventually really love, even as you love. Thank you, Lord. Amen.